When I inherited my grandfather's land, I knew it came with a few challenges: an old dam, a long-forgotten waterway, and a handful of neighbors who didn't appreciate the fact that their perfect little hay suburb existed only because of that dam. My family built it decades ago to hold back the river, turning what was once a swampy valley into a livable stretch of green neighborhoods and waterfront homes. Every house downstream existed because of that structure, and yet the local HOA acted like they owned it. At first, they were friendly enough. They'd send newsletters, invitations to barbecues, and polite notices about a community participation. But things started to sour when they realized I wasn't planning to pay their so-called community maintenance fees. The dam wasn't part of their jurisdiction. It was privately owned, clearly marked, and maintained by me. Still, they sent letters claiming that the dam was a shared infrastructure and that I owed monthly dues for upkeep and risk management. When I called their office to explain that the dam was my private property, the HOA president, a woman named Cheryl, laughed and said, "I guess you'll need to prove that in court." I thought it was a bluff. But I soon realized the HOA wasn't playing games. Within weeks, I started receiving fines, ridiculous ones, for things like excess water release, a failure to maintain a community safety barrier, and even improper shoreline aesthetics. None of them applied to me, but the HOA had lawyers who thrived on intimidation. I ignored the letters, but they didn't stop. Then came the threats. A failure to comply will result in enforcement action. I had no idea what kind of action they meant, but I was about to find out. One morning, I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery. I ran out of the cabin and saw excavators and trucks rolling down toward the dam. Men in safety vests were hammering signs that read "Edna Zone, authorized personnel only." My heart sank. "Sir," I yelled, demanding to know what they were doing, and one of them shouted back that they were performing authorized demolition. I nearly lost my mind. They had no legal right to touch my property. I called the sheriff immediately, but by the time deputies arrived, the HOA hired crew had already started breaking through the upper section of the dam. Water trickled out slowly, turning into a small, steady stream. The sheriff told them to stop, but Cheryl showed up waving papers, claiming it was the approved community work. The deputies looked uncertain, and I could see they didn't know who to believe. While they argued, the excavator's bucket slammed into the dam, again widening the gap. Water began spilling faster. I knew then that stopping it would take more than words. Over the next few days, the HOA doubled down. They fenced off the area, posted security guards, and started inspections. I wasn't even allowed near the structure that had been in my family for generations. I called my lawyer, who filed an injunction immediately, but by the time it reached court, the damage was done. Half the dam's retaining wall was gone. The water level in the lake had already dropped several feet, exposing muddy shorelines and fish carcasses. The HOA claimed they were repairing it, but in reality, they were gutting it. What they didn't realize was that my grandfather was meticulous when he built that dam. It wasn't just a pile of concrete, it was an intricate water control system designed to protect the entire valley. Without it, the river didn't just drain, it changed course. For decades, the dam had quietly redirected runoff from the nearby hills and stabilized the ground under the subdivision. Now, with their repairs, they had set nature free again. The first signs came during the next rainfall. The small creek behind the neighborhood swelled overnight, pushing against the storm drains that were never meant to handle a real flood. I watched from my porch as the water line crept higher along the HOA community lake. They sent out frantic emails warning residents to avoid the walking trails and playground areas, but it was already too late. By the third day, half the lower subdivision's yards were underwater. Cheryl showed up at my gate, soaked and furious, demanding that I do something about it. I told her I already had. I'd filed for an injunction weeks ago, and if she wanted something fixed, She could start by explaining to the judge why she authorized the demolition of a privately owned dam. Her face turned red and she shouted, "This is your fault. You let this happen." I pointed down the hill where water was now gushing through the broken wall, tearing through the same ground her contractors had weakened. No," I said quietly. "You did." The following night, the rain came harder. The cracks in the remaining dam wall widened with every surge of water. I drove down to the site at dawn and saw it, a jagged opening about 10 feet wide, with the lake behind it churning violently. The ground trembled as the last section of the wall began to buckle. I called the emergency line, warning them to evacuate the neighborhood below, but by the time the alert went out, the inevitable happened. With a deafening roar, the dam gave way completely. A wall of muddy water surged down the valley, crashing through the trees, ripping up fences, and slamming into the backyards of the pristine homes that had once looked down on my old, ugly dam. Cars floated, sheds crumpled, and streetlights vanished under a brown torrent. I watched from the ridge, powerless but strangely calm, as the same people who'd called me stubborn and uncooperative now screamed for help. By evening, the floodwaters had reached the main road, cutting off access to half the neighborhood. Emergency crews worked through the night, pulling people out of flooded basements and rescuing stranded families from rooftops. Nobody died, thank God. Thank God, but the damage was catastrophic. Half the subdivision was unlivable, and the other half was dealing with contaminated soil and property damage so severe that insurance companies refused to cover it. When the investigation began, the truth came out fast. The HOA had no legal authority to perform a maintenance or demolition on my dam. The supposed approval papers a Cheryl had waved in front of the sheriff turned out to be falsified documents, drafted by their board secretary and stamped with an expired county permit from years ago. The county hit them with a massive fine, and the homeowners turned on her almost immediately. The HOA board resigned one by one as lawsuits piled up. When I finally stood in court, my lawyer handed the judge photos, emails, and property records proving everything. The judge read through it all, his face unreadable, before looking up and saying, "It appears you tried to stop this several times." I nodded. They wouldn't listen. He leaned back and sighed. Then it looks like nature did the listening for them. The court awarded me full compensation for property damage, attorney fees, and a percentage of the insurance claims the HOA had filed. Irony, those payments came directly from the HOA remaining funds, which meant every homeowner who once complained about my dam now had to pay me. In the months that followed, the HOA dissolved completely. The neighborhood remained half empty, with homes abandoned or up for sale. The once pretty lakefront lawns were now muddy wastelands dotted with debris and broken fences. Every time I drove past, I could still see the faint waterline on their brick walls, a reminder of what their arrogance had cost them. As for me, I rebuilt the dam properly, safely, and this time with official county oversight. The new one stood taller and stronger than before, with reinforced spillways and modern control valves. When the inspectors came to sign off on it, one of them asked, "You really want to rebuild after all that?" I smiled. Of course. My grandfather didn't build it to hold back water. He built it to hold back people who forget who they owe their ground to. Now, whenever it rains, I stand on the ridge and watch the new dam do its work. Steady, unshakable, and quiet. The sound of rushing water is strangely comforting, like the land itself remembering who's in charge. I don't feel angry anymore, just satisfied. The HOA tried to destroy what my family built for unpaid fees, but in the end, all they managed to do was wash away their own kingdom of control. The river took back what was always its own, and justice flowed right along with it.